Is 100% fiction. All elements are imaginary. Coincidences with reality are accidental. But 18. Entertainment only. Angel's phone hit the bathroom floor. The voice on the voicemail kept talking, but she could no longer process words. Sitting on the cold tile, legs shaking, her eyes fixed on the positive pregnancy test in one hand while her cracked phone lay on the floor beside her. We deeply regret to inform you that there was a failure in the artificial insemination procedure performed at our clinic. The sample used does not correspond to the anonymous donor you selected. We ask that you contact us urgently to... The message ended. The silence in her small Brooklyn apartment was deafening. Angel was 25 years old. She had a career as a piano teacher that she loved, an apartment she could afford on her own, and a dream, to be a mother. No romantic complications, no depending on anyone, just her and her baby against the world. And now she was pregnant by a stranger. A mistake, a switched sample. Her hands trembled as she finally managed to stand up and call the clinic. 2 hours later, Dr. Hoffman's office smelled of disinfectant and lies. The doctor was pale. Her assistants had been dismissed. The blinds were closed. And there was a lawyer sitting in the corner of the room who wouldn't stop sweating. "Miss Blackwood," the doctor began, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "I need you to understand the gravity of the situation before I reveal any information." "The gravity?" Angel let out a humorless laugh. "I'm pregnant with the wrong sperm. I think I already understand the gravity." "No," the doctor swallowed hard. "You don't." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should wait." "Wait for what?" Angel leaned forward. "I want to know whose baby this is." Now, Dr. Hoffman looked at the lawyer. The lawyer looked at the door. No one looked at Angel. "The genetic material used belongs to a client who made a private deposit at our clinic 3 years ago," the doctor finally said. "A client who pays very well for our discretion. And he already knows." Angel's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, already knows?" The office door opened. Angel turned, and her heart stopped. Mateo Santoro hadn't changed in 7 years. No, that was a lie. He had changed. The gray eyes she remembered full of warmth were now blocks of ice. His shoulders had broadened. His jaw was more defined. And the tattoo climbing up his neck, the one she used to trace with her fingers on summer nights, now looked more like a death sentence than a work of art. He was dressed in black, shirt, pants, shoes, soul. Behind him, 2 enormous men flanked the door like statues of flesh and danger. "Leave us," Mateo said. It wasn't a request. Dr. Hoffman practically ran. The lawyer tripped over his own feet to get out. The bodyguards closed the door from outside, and then it was just the 2 of them. Angel and the man who had destroyed her heart when she was 18. Mateo. She managed to say his name without her voice trembling. A miracle. He didn't respond immediately. His eyes traveled across her face as if cataloging every difference every year that had passed, every new line. When he finally spoke, his voice was grave as a tomb. "You're carrying my child." It wasn't a question. Angel stood up. Not because she wanted to appear strong, her legs were jelly, but because she refused to look up at him from below. "Technically," she said, crossing her arms, "I'm carrying the child of an anonymous donor, who, through some grotesque act of medical incompetence, happens to be you." A muscle jumped in his jaw. "There is no mistake, Angel." "Of course there is. You think I would choose to have your child?" The silence that followed was so dense, it could be cut with a knife. Mateo took a step toward her. She didn't back away. Retreating was admitting fear, and Angel Blackwood would not give him that satisfaction. "Let me rephrase," he said, stopping less than 3 feet from her. "There is no acceptable mistake. This is my heir, my blood, and you're coming back with me. Today." Angel blinked, then laughed. It was a genuine laugh, the kind that made her eyes water and her stomach hurt. Mateo watched her with an expression that oscillated between confusion and irritation. "Sorry," she said, wiping her eyes. "It's just that for a second I thought you said I was going to come back with you, like I was a lost suitcase you came to pick up at the airport. I'm not joking. I know. That's what makes it funny." She grabbed her purse from the chair and threw it over her shoulder. "It was terrible seeing you again, Mateo. Truly the worst moment of my year. And keep in mind, I just found out I'm accidentally pregnant. But I'm heading out. I have a student at 4, and I need to figure out how to sue this clinic for every penny they have." She walked toward the door. Mateo didn't move to stop her. He didn't need to. The clinic will file for bankruptcy tomorrow, he said to her back. The entire staff has already signed confidentiality agreements. And the 3 hospitals closest to your apartment now owe me enough favors to ensure you don't have an abortion without my knowledge. Angel froze with her hand on the doorknob. You didn't do that. I did. She turned slowly. In 2 hours? In 40 minutes. He tilted his head. The other 80 were for tracking down your address, your medical history, your finances, your students, and the identity of every person you've dated since you left me. Her heart thundered. This is insane. This is efficiency. This is stalking. This is protection. Mateo finally approached again, and this time something changed in his eyes. Something old. Something she hadn't seen since she was 18, and believed in happy endings. You don't understand what world you're entering, Angel. My world. And in this world, a woman carrying my heir is the most valuable target there is. Then let's pretend it's not yours. Impossible. Why? Because my family already knows. Angel felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. How? The clinic has an employee on my payroll. Insurance in case they tried anything with my genetic material. Mateo shrugged as if explaining the weather. The moment the mistake was discovered, I was notified. And the moment I was notified, your family found out. My family found out. Angel wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. She wanted to go back in time and never walk into that damn clinic. What family exactly? She asked. Even though she already knew the answer, she had always known. From the day she saw the lion tattoo on Mateo's neck and chose to ignore it. From the calls he answered in whispered Italian. From the business that was never explained. What family, Mateo? He stared at her without blinking. The Santoros. Of Chicago. Of New York. Of everywhere that matters. The mafia. She had always known. She just never wanted to believe. The car waiting outside the clinic was black, discreet, and absolutely bulletproof. Angel knew because Mateo made a point of showing her. The glass can withstand 50 caliber rounds, he said casually as he guided her inside. The chassis has been reinforced for explosives, and the driver Bruno has killed 17 people. 17 confirmed people, Bruno corrected from the front seat, adjusting the rearview mirror. Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm not your ma'am, Angel said automatically. Yet? Mateo added, climbing in beside her. The car started moving before she could formulate a response. Where are we going? She asked. Home. My home. My home. Angel turned her head so fast her neck cracked. Absolutely not. It wasn't a question. I don't care. She planted her hands on the seat. Mateo, I have a life. Students. Recitals to organize, bills to pay. You can't just kidnap me. It's not kidnapping if you came willingly. I didn't come willingly. You got in the car, didn't you? Because you basically threatened to control every hospital in the city. Mateo stared at her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, the corner of his mouth lifted, almost a smile. The first she'd seen since he walked into that office. You've always been dramatic, and you've always been a controlling maniac. Some things don't change. Some don't, he agreed, and there was something in his voice that made her stomach clench. She looked away toward the window. The city passed in a blur. Angel tried to organize her thoughts, but it was impossible. Her life had become a hurricane in less than 3 hours. Pregnant, with Mateo's baby, the Mateo who had abandoned her without explanation 7 years ago. The Mateo she swore she'd never see again. The Mateo who, apparently, was heir to one of the most dangerous crime families in the world. You have questions, Mateo said after a few minutes of silence. I have a few hundred. Ask 3, for now. Angel turned to him. Why did you store sperm at a fertility clinic? Because my lifestyle presents risks. I wanted to ensure I'd have options when I decided to have an heir. He didn't hesitate. Next, why did you abandon me 7 years ago? The silence this time was different. Heavier. Older. Mateo looked straight ahead. Because you were 18. You had a scholarship to the best music school in the country. A future that didn't include bullets, funerals, and blood on your hands. He finally looked at her. Because I was going to destroy you if I stayed. So you destroyed me by leaving. I know. The brutal honesty made something break in her chest. Angel swallowed the knot in her throat. Last question, he said quietly. She took a deep breath. What do you want from me now? Mateo turned his body toward her. His knee touched hers. His eyes were winter storms. I want you to marry me. Angel should have laughed again. She should have screamed. She should have told Bruno to stop the car and jump through the bulletproof window. But she did none of those things, because for the first time since she'd walked into that office, she saw something on Mateo's face that he was trying to hide. Desperation. Why? She whispered. Because war is coming. Because my father died 2 months ago and now I run a family that has more enemies than friends. Because the air in your womb just became the most valuable currency in the underworld. He touched her face, gentle, as if she were made of crystal. And because I never stopped thinking about you. Not one day, not 1 hour. The car stopped. Through the tinted glass, Angel saw a mansion, iron gates, armed men, immense gardens, a gilded cage. 3 days, Mateo said. Give me 3 days to show you I can protect you and our child. If after that you still want to leave, I'll let you go. No pursuit, no threats, you'll never see me again. And if I stay, then you marry me. And I spend the rest of my life making sure no one ever touches either of you. It was madness. It was impossible. It was the worst decision she could make. Angel looked at the pregnancy test still in her purse, at the mansion beyond the glass, at the gray eyes that 7 years ago were her definition of home. 3 days, she said, and sealed her fate. The Santoro mansion wasn't a home. It was a fortress pretending to be one. Angel counted 12 armed men before she even reached the front door. They stood at strategic points across the property, by the gates, along the hedges, on the balconies above. All of them watched her with the same expression, curiosity mixed with something that looked disturbingly like pity. Welcome to the cage, their eyes seemed to say. Stop analyzing the security, Mateo said beside her. I'm not. You've counted every guard since we passed the gates. Angel didn't respond. He was right, and they both knew it. The front doors opened before they reached them, revealing a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in an elegant knot. Her face was beautiful in the way ancient marble is beautiful, cold, flawless, and utterly unforgiving. So, the woman said, her eyes traveling down Angel's body and back up with surgical precision. This is her. Nonna, Mateo said, a warning in his voice. The piano teacher, the woman, Mateo's grandmother apparently, stepped closer. The one who made you useless for 3 years after she left. Angel felt Mateo stiffen beside her. I made him useless? Angel couldn't help herself. He's the one who disappeared without a word. The grandmother's eyebrows rose. Then, impossibly, she smiled. She has a spine. Good. She turned and walked inside. She'll need it. The interior of the mansion was exactly what Angel expected and nothing like it at all. Yes, there were the marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, the artwork that probably cost more than her entire building. But there were also family photos on every surface. Children's drawings framed beside Renaissance paintings, a pair of muddy soccer cleats abandoned by the staircase. It was a home, a real one, just one that happened to be run by criminals. The east wing is yours, Mateo said, guiding her up a sweeping staircase. You'll have a private suite, a piano room, and direct access to the gardens. A piano room? A Steinway Model D concert grand. He glanced at her. I remembered. Something twisted in Angel's chest. She ignored it. I'm not staying long enough to need a piano room. 3 days. That was the deal. 3 days doesn't require a concert grand. Mateo stopped walking. They were in a long hallway now. Doors lining both sides, afternoon light streaming through tall windows. Angel? His voice was different, softer. I've spent 7 years imagining what it would be like to have you here. Let me at least pretend for 3 days. She should have said something cutting. Something that would remind him he had no right to imagine anything about her. Instead, she heard herself ask, why did you keep the sperm? Really? Mateo was quiet for a long moment. Because I knew I'd never love anyone else enough to have children with them, he finally said. And I didn't want my line to end with me. Before Angel could respond, a door at the end of the hallway burst open. A boy, maybe 7 years old, came sprinting toward them with a Nerf gun in each hand. Behind him, a girl around 12 chased with murder in her eyes. Luca, I swear to God, you can't catch me. You're too slow. You're old. The boy skidded to a stop when he saw Mateo. His face went pale. Uncle Matt, he squeaked. Luca. Mateo's voice was calm, but Angel saw the corner of his mouth twitch. What did I say about running in the halls? That it's undignified for a Santoro? And what are you doing? Being undignified? The girl caught up, panting. She was beautiful, with dark curly hair and the same gray eyes as Mateo. She froze when she saw Angel. Who's that? She demanded. Julia, Luca, this is Angel. Mateo placed a hand on Angel's lower back. She's going to be staying with us. For how long? Julia asked suspiciously. That depends on her, Mateo said. Luca tilted his head, studying Angel with unnerving intensity. Are you Uncle Matt's girlfriend? Because he's never had a girlfriend. Just ladies who visit sometimes and leave before breakfast. Luca. Mateo's voice cracked like a whip. Angel bit her lip to keep from laughing. I'm not his girlfriend. We're old friends. Old friends who are having a baby? Julia crossed her arms. Nona already told everyone she's terrible at secrets. So much for easing into things. Angel looked at Mateo. He had the expression of a man who wanted the ground to swallow him whole. We'll talk more at dinner, he said tersely, ushering the children away. Julia, take your brother. And Luca. No more Nerf guns inside. But Uncle Matt, now. The children scurried off, but not before Julia shot Angel one last look of intense curiosity. When they were gone, Angel finally let herself laugh. Ladies who visit and leave before breakfast? I'm going to kill that child. No, you're not. You looked at him like he hung the moon. She tilted her head. They're your siblings, kids. Something dark passed across Mateo's face. My brother's. Dominic. He died 18 months ago. The laughter died in Angel's throat. I'm sorry. Don't be. He was a terrible person and worse father. Mateo started walking again. But the children are innocent and they're mine now, just like everything else. Angel followed, processing this new information. Mateo wasn't just the heir anymore. He was the patriarch. A 35-year-old man suddenly responsible for an entire empire, 2 orphaned children, and apparently, her. No wonder he looked so tired. The suite he'd prepared for her was larger than her entire apartment. But what made Angel stop in the doorway wasn't the size or the luxury, or even the massive windows overlooking the gardens. It was the photos, framed on the dresser, on the nightstands, on the walls. Photos of her, of them, from 7 years ago. Angel at a piano recital, laughing at something off camera. The 2 of them at Coney Island, her hair wild from the wind. A candid shot of her sleeping, morning light catching the curve of her cheek. You kept these, she whispered. Mateo stood in the doorway watching her. I kept everything. Why? Because throwing them away would mean accepting that you were really gone. He paused. I was never very good at acceptance. Angel picked up the Coney Island photo. She remembered that day. They'd eaten terrible hot dogs and ridden the cyclone 3 times. He'd won her a stuffed bear at one of those rigged games. She'd kissed him on the beach as the sun went down. 3 weeks later, he was gone. This is manipulative, she said, setting the photo down. You know that, right? Putting me in a room full of memories designed to make me emotional. Probably. You're not even going to deny it? I stopped lying to you 7 years ago, Angel. I'm not going to start again. Mateo stepped into the room. Yes, I put the photos here on purpose. Yes, I want you to remember how good we were together. And yes, I'm hoping it makes you want to stay. At least you're honest. I'm always honest with you. That was the problem. He stopped an arm's length away. If I'd been willing to lie, I could have kept you. Told you I was a businessman, an investor, something clean. But I couldn't do that to you. So instead, you just disappeared. Instead, I gave you a chance at a normal life. Angel laughed bitterly. And how do you think that worked out? Based on my research? Brilliantly. His voice was soft. Berkeley graduate. Rising star in New York's classical music scene. Apartment in Brooklyn. Students who adore you. A life built entirely on your own talent and determination. And completely alone. The words hung between them. Mateo reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek. You're not alone anymore. I don't know if that's a comfort or a threat. Both, he admitted. Everything with me is both. A knock at the door broke the moment. One of the guards, not Bruno, a different one, appeared in the doorway. Boss, we have a situation. Moretti's men were spotted at the edge of the property. Mateo's entire demeanor changed. The softness vanished, replaced by cold steel. How many? 4, just watching. They left when our team approached. Increase perimeter security. I want eyes on every approach and nobody in or out without my authorization. Mateo glanced at Angel, and something fierce blazed in his eyes. And assign Marco to her detail. She doesn't leave this wing without protection. The guard nodded and disappeared. Angel felt ice crawl down her spine. Who's Moretti? Mateo turned back to her, and for the first time she saw the weight of the crown on his shoulders. The man who killed my father and brother. His jaw tightened. The man who's going to try to kill me next. Angel couldn't sleep. It wasn't the bed. That was like sleeping on a cloud wrapped in Egyptian cotton. It wasn't the silence either, though the absence of Brooklyn's constant sirens and shouting neighbors was disorienting. It was the photos. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw them. Saw herself at 18, deliriously happy, completely unaware that her world was about to collapse. The girl in those pictures had no idea that the man she loved was heir to a criminal empire. No idea that in 3 weeks, he would vanish like smoke. At 2 a.m., Angel gave up on sleep entirely. She wrapped herself in the silk robe she'd found in the closet, her size, of course, because Mateo apparently knew everything about her, and slipped into the hallway. The mansion was different at night, quieter. The guards were still there, shadows at every corner, but they merely nodded as she passed. Either Mateo had told them to let her roam, or they didn't see a pregnant piano teacher as much of a threat. Both were probably true. She found the piano room without meaning to. One moment she was wandering aimlessly, and the next she was standing in front of a door that was slightly ajar, golden light spilling through the crack. She pushed it open. The Steinway sat in the center of the room like a throne. It was beautiful. 9 feet of polished ebony, ivory keys gleaming under the soft lamplight. Angel approached it slowly, reverently, the way one might approach a sleeping dragon. She sat down, lifted the cover, let her fingers hover over the keys, and played. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the room. She hadn't planned it. Her hands simply knew. The melody poured out of her like water from a broken dam, carrying 7 years of loneliness and anger and desperate, stubborn hope. She didn't know how long she played. Minutes. Hours. The music consumed her completely, blocking out the mansion and the guards and the man sleeping somewhere above her. When the final note faded, she heard the applause. Angel spun around on the bench. Luca stood in the doorway in Spider-Man pajamas, clapping enthusiastically. Behind him, Julia watched with an expression that was trying very hard to be unimpressed and failing miserably. "That was so cool," Luca breathed. "Can you teach me?" "It's 2 in the morning, Angel said. "What are you two doing up?" "Couldn't sleep," Julia shrugged, walking into the room. "Luca had a nightmare and came to find me. Then we heard the music." "Nightmares are for babies," Luca protested. "I just had a bad dream. It's different." Angel bit back a smile. "Of course. Completely different." She scooted over on the bench, making room. Luca immediately climbed up beside her, his small feet dangling above the pedals. Julia hung back, pretending to examine a painting on the wall, but Angel caught her glancing at the piano every few seconds. "Here," Angel said, taking Luca's hands and positioning them on the keys. "This is middle C, the most important note. Everything starts here." She guided him through a simple scale, then a basic melody. Mary Had a Little Lamb, the universal starter. Luca's face scrunched in concentration, his tongue poking out as he tried to hit the right keys. "I'm terrible," he announced after his 3rd attempt. "You're learning. There's a difference." Angel nudged him gently. "Your uncle was terrible too when I first taught him." Both children's heads snapped toward her. "You taught Uncle Matt piano?" Julia abandoned her pretense of disinterest and moved closer. "He never told us that. It was a long time ago, before you were born." "Were you his girlfriend then?" Luca asked. "I was." "Why did you break up?" Angel hesitated. "How did you explain adult complications to a 7-year-old? "Sometimes," she said carefully, "people who love each other make choices that hurt, not because they want to, but because they think it's the right thing to do. Your uncle thought leaving me would protect me from his world." "Did it?" Julia asked quietly. Angel looked at this girl who had lost her father, who was being raised by an uncle in a house full of armed guards, who probably understood more about sacrifice and pain than any 12-year-old should. "No," Angel admitted. "It just made us both miserable in different ways." Silence fell over the room. Then Luca placed his hand on Angel's arm. "Uncle Matt smiles more since you got here," he said matter-of-factly. "He's always sad and angry, but today at dinner he smiled 3 times. I counted." Before Angel could respond, a voice came from the doorway. "It's nearly 3 in the morning." Mateo stood there in a white t-shirt and gray sweatpants, hair mussed from sleep, looking so much like the boy she'd loved at 18 that Angel's heart physically ached. "The children should be in bed," he continued, but there was no real sternness in his voice. "We heard music," Julia explained. "Angel was teaching Luca piano." "At 3 a.m.? You always said learning has no schedule, Luca pointed out. Mateo's jaw twitched. Using my own words against me. Wonderful. He gestured toward the door. Bed. Both of you. Now. The children scrambled off the bench, but Luca paused at the door. Angel, will you teach me more tomorrow? She looked at Mateo. His expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes, those winter storm eyes, held something that looked almost like hope. If I'm still here tomorrow, she said. Luca grinned and disappeared. Julia followed, but not before shooting Angel a small, tentative smile. Then it was just the two of them. Again. Mateo walked to the piano and sat beside her on the bench. The space was too small for two adults. Their shoulders touched, their thighs pressed together. Neither moved away. You still play beautifully, he said. You still eavesdrop. Old habits. He reached out and pressed a single key. Middle C. The note hung in the air between them. Do you remember teaching me? You were a terrible student. I was a distracted student. There's a difference. His voice dropped. Hard to focus on scales when the teacher looked like you. Angel rolled her eyes, but warmth spread through her chest anyway. That line didn't work when you were 28. It's not going to work now. It worked a little when I was 28. It did not. You kissed me after I finally mastered that Beethoven piece. For 3 hours. The warmth became a fire. That was because you mastered Beethoven, not because of your terrible flirting. Mateo laughed. Actually laughed. A real one. Deep and warm. And Angel realized with a start that she hadn't heard that sound in 7 years, hadn't known how much she'd missed it until this moment. I miss this, he said, as if reading her mind. Missed you. The way you never let me get away with anything. Someone had to keep your ego in check. Everyone else was too afraid to try. He turned to face her, and suddenly the playfulness was gone, replaced by something raw and honest. My father ruled through fear, my brother through cruelty. When I took over, I swore I'd be different. But it's hard to be different when everyone around you is terrified to tell you the truth. And I'm not afraid of you. You've never been afraid of me. His hand found hers on the keys. That first day we met, you told me my taste in music was pedestrian and my understanding of Chopin was superficial at best. It was. You thought the nocturnes were nice background music. I was trying to impress you. You failed spectacularly, and yet you agreed to teach me anyway. Angel looked down at their intertwined fingers. His hands were different now, rougher, with faint scars she didn't remember. What happened to your hands? She asked. The question seemed to catch him off guard. He glanced down, flexing his fingers. Work. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you without lying. She should have pressed, should have demanded details, forced him to admit the violence that lived beneath the surface. But instead, she found herself turning his hand over, tracing the lines of his palm. The children, she said quietly. They lost both parents? Their mother left when Luca was 2. Couldn't handle the life. His voice hardened. Dominic was not a good husband or father. He was killed in a deal gone wrong. Moretti's people, though, we couldn't prove it. And now Moretti is coming for you. Moretti is always coming. He wants the Santoro territory. Has for 20 years. Mateo's grip on her hand tightened. He's patient. Methodical. He killed my father slowly. Over months. Poison. By the time we realized it was too late. Angel felt sick. And your brother? Ambush. 3 bullets. His jaw clenched. I was supposed to be in that car. The words hit her like ice water. He died instead of you? He was always taking things that were meant for me. Even death. There was no love in Mateo's voice when he spoke of his brother. No grief. Just cold, hard acceptance. Now I'm what's left. And Moretti knows that if he kills me, if he takes the air I never thought I'd have, the Santoro line ends forever. Understanding dawned like a terrible sunrise. That's why you need me here. Why you want to marry me so quickly. Angel pulled her hand away. It's not about love. It's about securing your bloodline before Moretti can stop you. Mateo didn't deny it. It started that way, he admitted. When I found out about the pregnancy, my first thought was strategy. Protection. Making sure my heir survived. He stood walking to the window, his back to her. But then I saw you in that office. Heard you laugh at me. Watch you refuse to be intimidated. And I remembered why I fell in love with you in the first place. He turned. I'm not asking you to trust me, Angel. I haven't earned that. I'm asking for 3 days to prove that this isn't just about bloodlines and power, that the man who loved you 7 years ago is still in here, buried under all this weight. Angel stood from the bench. She should walk away. Every logical part of her brain screamed to run back to Brooklyn, to her small apartment and her simple life and her manageable loneliness, but logic had never been her strong suit when it came to him. 2 days left, she said. Don't waste them. Day 2 began with gunfire. Angel bolted upright in bed, heart slamming against her ribs. The shots were distant, somewhere beyond the gardens, but unmistakable. 3 sharp cracks, then silence. She was halfway to the door when it burst open. Marco, the guard Mateo had assigned to her, filled the doorway. His hand rested on the gun at his hip, but his expression was calm. Stay inside, ma'am. Standard perimeter check. That didn't sound standard. Intruder at the north fence, already handled. Handled. Such a clean word for something so violent. Is anyone hurt? Marco's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, that she'd asked. One of ours took a graze. He'll live. The intruder won't. Angel's stomach turned. She'd known intellectually what Mateo's world involved, but knowing and hearing were different things. I need to see Mateo. Boss is in a meeting. He asked not to be disturbed. Then disturb him anyway. Marco hesitated. Angel could see him weighing his orders against the fire in her eyes. Please, she added softer. I just need to know he's okay. Something shifted in the guard's face. He nodded once and stepped aside. She found the meeting by following the raised voices. The study doors were thick mahogany, but anger had a way of bleeding through walls. Angel recognized Mateo's voice immediately. Cold, controlled, deadly, along with several others she didn't know. She pushed the doors open without knocking. 6 men turned to stare at her. They were arranged around a massive desk covered in maps, photographs, and what looked disturbingly like surveillance images. Mateo stood at the head, his grandmother seated beside him like a silver-haired general. Angel, Mateo's voice was carefully neutral. This isn't a good time. I heard gunshots. A minor incident. It's been resolved. Someone died. That's not minor. The room went very still. One of the men, heavy-set with a scar running from his eyebrow to his jaw, let out a low whistle. This is the piano teacher. He looked at Mateo with something like amusement. She's got more spine than half your capos. Enzo. Mateo's voice was a warning. I'm just saying. Most women would be crying or fainting. She's demanding answers. Enzo turned to Angel with an appraising look. I like her. I don't need your approval, Angel said flatly. I need to know what's happening. If I'm going to be a target in this war of yours, I deserve to understand it. Nona's lips curved into a thin smile. She has a point, Mateo. You can't keep her in a silk-lined cage and expect her to stay. Mateo's jaw tightened. For a long moment, Angel thought he would order her out. Instead, he pulled out a chair. Sit, he said. You want to understand? Then understand. The next hour was an education in violence. Angel learned that the Moretti family had been enemies of the Santoros for 3 generations, that the current head, Victor Moretti, was 72 years old and dying of cancer, which made him more dangerous, not less. A man with nothing to lose was capable of anything. She learned that Victor had 3 sons, all hungry for power, all convinced that destroying the Santoros was their path to their father's approval. The eldest, Dante, had ordered the hit on Mateo's brother. The middle one, Salvatore, had arranged the poisoning of Mateo's father. The youngest, Nico, was the one sending scouts to test the mansion's defenses. They're probing for weaknesses, Enzo explained, pointing to a map marked with red dots. Each incursion tells them something. Response time, guard positions, patrol patterns. And now they know about the baby, another man added, thin, sharp-eyed, with the air of an accountant who knew where all the bodies were buried. Word travels fast in our world. A Santoro heir is valuable leverage. No one touches her, Mateo said quietly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Anyone who tries doesn't walk away. Make sure that message spreads even faster. Angel's hand drifted unconsciously to her stomach. The baby was barely the size of a blueberry, the doctor had said. A cluster of cells that hadn't even started to look human yet. But sitting in this room surrounded by maps of death and men who dealt in violence like currency, that tiny cluster felt like the most important thing in the world. What's the plan? She heard herself ask. To end this? Every eye turned to her again. End it? Enzo laughed. Sweetheart, this war is older than you are. It doesn't end. Everything ends. One way or another. Angel looked at Mateo. So what's your way? Mateo studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to his men. Leave us. No one argued. Within 30 seconds, the room was empty except for Angel, Mateo and the ghost of every Santoro who had died in this endless war. You shouldn't have come in here, Mateo said once they were alone. Probably not. Those men will talk. By tonight, every soldier in my organization will know that my future wife challenged me in front of my capos. Future wife? Angel raised an eyebrow. I haven't agreed to anything. You're still here. That's agreement enough for the rumor mill. He moved to the window looking out at the gardens where just an hour ago a man had died. My authority depends on perception, Angel. If my men think I can't control my own household, is that what I am? Your household to control? Mateo turned. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping inches from her. This close, she could see the exhaustion carved into his features, the weight of empire pressing down on his shoulders. I meant, he said quietly, that I have spent years building a reputation as a man who cannot be touched, a man whose orders are absolute, a man who shows no weakness. His hand came up, fingers brushing her cheek with heartbreaking gentleness. And then you walk in, and I can't remember why any of that matters. Angel's breath caught. That's the problem, Mateo continued. You make me weak. You always have. And in my world, weakness gets people killed. Then maybe you need to build a different kind of strength. What do you mean? Angel thought of the children, of Julia's 2 old eyes and Luca's nightmares, of the guards who watched her with curiosity instead of contempt, of Nona, fierce and unbreakable, ruling beside her grandson like a queen. The men in that room, she said slowly, they follow you because they're afraid of you, but fear only goes so far. Eventually, someone will be more afraid of the Morettis than they are of you. What happens then? Mateo was silent. My mother was a piano teacher too, Angel continued. She used to say that a musician who plays from fear plays perfectly, but a musician who plays from love plays beautifully. There's a difference. Your mother never ran a crime family. No, but she built a studio from nothing. Taught 300 students over 30 years. When she died, every single one of them came to her funeral. Angel met his eyes. That's loyalty, Mateo. Real loyalty. Not because she scared them, but because she earned them. Something shifted in his expression. Something old and heavy beginning to crack. You think I can earn that kind of loyalty? After everything I've done? I think you're already trying. The children. The way you spoke to Marco this morning. The fact that your grandmother sits in your war councils as an equal. She took his hand. You're not your father or your brother. Stop trying to rule like them. Mateo looked at their joined hands. When he spoke, his voice was rough. The Morettis won't be defeated by kindness. No, but maybe your people will fight harder for a leader they love than one they fear. She squeezed his fingers. And maybe, if you show them who you really are, they'll fight not just for the Santoro name, but for you. They stood like that for a long moment, hand in hand, the weight of generations pressing against them. Then Mateo's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His face went pale. What? Angel asked. Moretti made his move. His voice was ice. There was a car bomb downtown. 4 of my men are dead and 6 civilians are in critical condition. Angel's blood ran cold. He's escalating. He's sending a message. Mateo was already moving toward the door. This is what happens when he thinks I'm distracted, when he smells weakness. Mateo, he stopped, hand on the doorframe, but didn't turn. You asked what my plan was. To end this. His voice was barely above a whisper. Before you came, I was going to offer a trade. My life for peace. Let Victor Moretti kill me, and in exchange he leaves the family alone. Angel's heart stopped. You can't. I can. I was going to. Now he turned and his eyes were burning. But that was before I knew about the baby. Before I remembered what it felt like to have something worth living for. He crossed back to her in 2 steps, cupping her face in his hands. You want to know what my plan is now? It's you. It's our child. It's building something that doesn't require my death to survive. His forehead pressed against hers. Give me a chance, Angel. Not just 3 days. Give me a real chance to be the man you described. A man worth loving. Angel closed her eyes. Every logical part of her screamed to run. This wasn't romance, this was madness. Blood and bullets and a future written in violence. But beneath it all, she felt the flutter of something new, something terrifying. Hope. 1 day left, she whispered against his lips. I'll make it count, he promised. And then he kissed her. The 3rd day arrived wrapped in silence. Angel woke to an empty mansion. No children running in the halls. No guards visible at their usual posts. Even the birds in the garden seemed to have vanished. Something was wrong. She found Marco outside her door, the only guard who hadn't disappeared. "Where is everyone?" "Lockdown protocol, ma'am. Boss's orders." Marco's face was stone. "Everyone non-essential has been moved to the safe house upstate." "The children?" "Already gone. Left at 4 this morning with Nonna and a 12-man escort." Angel's stomach dropped. "And I'm still here because moving you is exactly what Moretti expects." Marco hesitated. "And because the boss said you'd refuse to leave anyway." He wasn't wrong. She found Mateo in the basement. It wasn't a basement she'd seen before. Not the wine cellar or the laundry room or any of the other domestic spaces she'd wandered through. This was something else entirely. Steel doors, reinforced walls, the hum of generators, an armory. Mateo stood at a long table covered in weapons, methodically loading a handgun. He didn't look up when she entered. "You should be in your room. You should have told me what was happening. I'm telling you now." He set down the gun and picked up another. "Victor Moretti died last night, heart attack. His sons are fighting over the Empire, and the fastest way to unite them is a common enemy. You, me, and now, you." He finally looked at her, and the darkness in his eyes made her breath catch. "Dante Moretti put a price on your head this morning. $5 million for the woman carrying the Santoro heir." The number should have terrified her. Instead, Angel felt a strange calm settle over her bones. "So, that's why everyone left. You're expecting an attack. I'm expecting a war." Mateo holstered the gun and walked toward her. "I have 30 men holding this property, another 50 on the way. But the Morettis have numbers and desperation and nothing left to lose. And you kept me here because the safe house is 6 hours away, and the roads are being watched. Moving you would paint a target on the convoy." His hands found her shoulders. "Here, I can protect you. Out there, you'd be vulnerable." Angel studied his face, the tension in his jaw, the shadows under his eyes, the way his fingers trembled slightly against her arms. "When did you last sleep?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "What?" "Sleep, Mateo. That thing normal people do at night instead of loading weapons and planning battles." "I don't remember." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." He pulled away, running a hand through his hair. "I can't sleep. Not when you're in danger. Not when every time I close my eyes I see." He stopped. "See what?" Mateo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "The car. The one my brother died in. In my dreams, it's not Dominic inside. It's you." Angel's heart cracked. She closed the distance between them, taking his face in her hands. He was so much taller than her, so much stronger, but in this moment he looked like a man holding himself together by pure will. "I'm here," she said softly. "I'm alive, and I'm not going anywhere. You should. God, Angel, you should run as far from me as possible and never look back." "Probably." She brushed her thumb across his cheekbone. "But I've never been very good at doing what I should." Something broke in his expression. He pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair, and for a long moment they just stood there, wrapped in each other, while the weapons gleamed coldly around them. "I love you," he said into her hair. "I never stopped. Not for a single day." "I know. And you?" Angel pulled back to look at him. This man who had broken her heart, who had left her alone for 7 years, who ruled an empire of blood and violence and somehow still looked at her like she was the only light in his darkness. "Ask me again when we survive today," she said. "Then I'll tell you." The attack came at noon. Angel heard it before she saw it. The distant crack of automatic weapons, the shouts of men, the screech of tires on gravel. From the window of the study she watched black SUVs crash through the front gates, armed men pouring out like ants from a disturbed nest. Mateo appeared beside her, pulling her away from the glass. "Panic room, now. I'm not hiding while people die for me. You're not dying for your pride either." He gripped her arm, eyes blazing. "Angel, please. You're carrying our child. Let me protect you." The word hit her like a lightning bolt. Our child. Not his heir. Not the Santoro bloodline. Our child. She let him lead her. The panic room was buried beneath the study. A steel box with 6 inches of reinforced walls, its own air supply, and enough provisions to last 2 weeks. Monitors lined one wall, showing feeds from cameras throughout the property. Angel watched the battle unfold in high definition. The Morettis had brought at least 60 men. They came in waves, pushing against the mansion's defenses like water against a dam. Mateo's guards held the line, but they were outnumbered, and every minute brought more casualties. On screen 3, she saw Enzo take a bullet to the shoulder and keep firing. On screen 7, a young guard, barely older than Julia, fell and didn't get up. On screen 12, she saw Mateo. He moved through the chaos like a conductor through a symphony, directing men with hand signals, taking cover, returning fire. His face was calm, focused, absolutely deadly. This was who he really was, she realized. Not the gentle man who traced her fingers on piano keys. Not the vulnerable boy who confessed his fears in the dark. This was the Don, the killer, the monster he'd tried to protect her from. And she loved him anyway. 3 hours into the siege, everything changed. The monitors flickered. Angel's heart stopped as the feeds went dark one by one. Not from destruction, but from tampering. Someone was cutting the cameras systematically, methodically. Someone was inside. The steel door groaned. Angel pressed herself against the far wall, eyes fixed on the entrance. Mateo had assured her it would take a tank to breach this room. But the sounds coming from outside weren't explosions. They were tools, precise, patient. Then silence. The door swung open. A man stood in the threshold. Tall, dark-haired, with a cruel mouth and eyes that looked like Mateo's might, if all the warmth had been drained out. He wore an expensive suit stained with blood that clearly wasn't his own. "So," Dante Moretti said, stepping inside, "you're the piano teacher." Angel's hand found the gun Mateo had left her. A small pistol, loaded, safety off. She raised it with hands that didn't shake. "And you're the dead man who doesn't know it yet." Dante laughed. It was a horrible sound. "She has spirit. I see why Santoro likes her." He moved closer, seemingly unconcerned by the weapon pointed at his chest. $5 million, you know? That's what your head is worth, but I'm not here to kill you." "Then what do you want?" "Leverage." Dante smiled. "Mateo Santoro cares about 2 things in this world. His family name and you. The family I can destroy with bullets. But you," he tilted his head, "you I can use to make him kneel. He'll never kneel to you. He will if I threaten to cut that baby out of your belly." The words hit like ice water. Angel's grip on the gun tightened. "You won't touch me, won't I?" Dante took another step. "Put down the gun, piano teacher. We both know you've never killed anyone. You don't have it in you." He was 5 feet away. 4. Angel thought of Mateo, of the child inside her, of Luca's smile and Julia's fierce eyes and Nonna's sharp wit. She thought of every person who had underestimated her because she was soft, because she played music instead of war games, because she'd chosen beauty over violence. Dante was 3 feet away when she pulled the trigger. The bullet took him in the shoulder. Dante howled, staggering backward, and in that moment of chaos, Angel moved. She ran past him, through the door, into the corridor beyond. Behind her, she heard his cursing, his footsteps, but she didn't look back. She burst into the study just as Mateo came through the opposite door. Blood covered his shirt. A cut above his eye dripped red down his cheek. But he was alive, gloriously, impossibly alive, and when he saw her, something like relief shattered across his face. "Angel, Dante's in the panic room. I shot him." Mateo's eyes widened. Then, impossibly, he smiled. "You shot a Moretti?" "In the shoulder." He was threatening the baby. Something fierce and proud blazed in his expression. He crossed to her in 2 strides, pulling her against him. "That's my girl." Behind them, Enzo appeared in the doorway, clutching his wounded shoulder. "Boss, the Morettis are retreating. Without Dante leading the charge, they're falling apart." He glanced at Angel. "Someone want to tell me why the piano teacher has a gun?" "Because she's not just a piano teacher anymore," Mateo said, his arm tight around her waist. "She's a Santoro." The aftermath of battle smelled like gunpowder and copper. Angel stood on the mansion's front steps, watching Mateo's men move through the wreckage. Bodies were being carried away, some to hospitals, others to places she didn't want to think about. The beautiful gardens she'd admired 2 days ago were now churned earth and broken hedges. War had a way of destroying beauty. Mateo appeared beside her, a medic finishing the stitches above his eye. He waved the man away and took Angel's hand. "Dante's alive. My men have him in the East Wing. What happens to him now?" "That depends." Mateo's grip tightened. "On what you want." Angel turned to look at him. "What I want. He threatened you. Threatened our child. In my world, that means his life belongs to whoever he wronged." Something dark flickered in Mateo's eyes. "So I'm asking you, Angel, what do you want me to do with him?" The weight of the question pressed down on her shoulders. This was the reality of loving Mateo Santoro. Not just the romance and the piano rooms and the silk robes. This, decisions of life and death laid at her feet like offerings. If you kill him, she said slowly, his brothers will retaliate, eventually, and if you let him live, he becomes leverage, a bargaining chip. Mateo's jaw tightened, or a symbol of weakness depending on who's watching. Angel thought of the man who had smiled while threatening to cut her baby out of her body, the cruelty in his eyes, the absolute certainty that she was nothing but a pawn in his game. He has children? She asked. Mateo blinked, clearly not expecting the question. 2 daughters, 7 and 9. Then let him live. Angel met his eyes. Not for him, for them. So they don't grow up the way Julia and Luca did, orphans in a war they never chose. Something shifted in Mateo's expression. Wonder, maybe, or awe. You could have asked for his death. No one would have blamed you. Maybe not, but I'd blame myself. She touched his face, careful to avoid the fresh stitches. You asked me to help you build something different, something that doesn't require death to survive. This is where it starts. Mateo was quiet for a long moment. Then he pressed his forehead to hers. The 3 days are over, he said softly, and I still don't know your answer. You do, Angel smiled. You just want to hear me say it. Maybe I do. She pulled back to look at him properly. This man who had broken her heart and spent 7 years regretting it, who killed to protect his family but still looked at children's drawings with wonder, who ruled an empire of shadows and still played Chopin in the dark. I love you, she said. I've loved you since I was 18 years old, and I never stopped, no matter how hard I tried. Leaving you nearly destroyed me. Staying might actually destroy me. She laughed softly. But I'd rather be destroyed with you than survive without you. Mateo's breath caught. For a moment, the Don of the Santoro family looked like a man who'd been handed an impossible gift. Is that a yes? That's a yes. He kissed her. Around them, the soldiers stopped working. The medics paused mid-bandage. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath as Mateo Santoro kissed his future wife on the steps of his battle-scarred mansion. When they finally broke apart, Enzo was standing nearby with a barely suppressed grin. So, he said, should I start planning the wedding? Or are we going to pretend I didn't just see that? Start planning, Mateo said, his arm still wrapped around Angel. And Enzo? Make it the biggest wedding this city has ever seen. 2 weeks later, the Moretti situation resolved itself with surprising elegance. Without Victor's iron will holding them together, the 3 brothers turned on each other. Salvatore made a play for power and lost. Badly. Nico fled to Europe with whatever money he could grab, and Dante, nursing his wounded shoulder and his wounded pride, found himself facing a choice. Mateo offered it personally, in a room full of witnesses from both families. Peace, Mateo said, his voice carrying through the gathered crowd. Complete and permanent. Your territory remains yours. Your businesses remain yours. But the war ends. Here, today. Dante's eyes found Angel, standing beside Nonna in a simple black dress. And the woman? The child she carries? Off limits. Forever. Mateo's voice could have frozen steel. Any move against my family, and that includes my wife and children, will be answered with extinction. Not war. Extinction. Am I clear? The silence stretched. Then Dante nodded. Clear. They didn't shake hands. Men like them didn't pretend to be friends. But when Dante walked out of that room, something that had burned for 3 generations finally went cold. Peace. Fragile, conditional, but real. Angel let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. The wedding was not small. Despite Angel's protests, Mateo insisted on making a statement. 300 guests. A cathedral decorated with 10,000 white roses. A dress that made her feel like a princess in a fairy tale, albeit one with armed guards at every entrance. Julia served as her maid of honor, looking terrifyingly elegant in lavender silk. Luca was the ring bearer, only dropping the rings twice during rehearsal. And Nonna sat in the front row dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief while pretending she wasn't crying. Santoros don't cry, she said when Mateo called her out. Of course not, Nonna. I have allergies. In October? The roses. Terrible for my sinuses. Angel laughed and hugged the old woman, who stiffened for exactly 1 second before hugging her back fiercely. Take care of my grandson, Nonna whispered. He pretends to be iron, but he's glass underneath. Always has been. I know, Angel whispered back. I'll keep him whole. The ceremony itself was a blur. Angel remembered fragments, the weight of the dress, the tremor in Mateo's voice when he said his vows, the way his hands shook when he slipped the ring onto her finger. She remembered Luca loudly asking if they were married yet during the silent prayer, and Julia's mortified shushing. But mostly, she remembered Mateo's eyes, the way he looked at her like she was a miracle, like he still couldn't believe she was real, that she'd chosen him, that after everything they were standing here together. "I spent 7 years preparing to die," he said quietly, words meant only for her. "And then you walked back into my life and taught me how to live again." Angel blinked back tears. "That might be the most romantic thing you've ever said." "I've been practicing." "It shows." When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, the cathedral erupted in applause. Mateo kissed her like a drowning man finding air, and Angel kissed him back with 7 years of loneliness finally ending. They walked out of the cathedral as the Santoro family, together. 1 year later, the nursery was painted soft yellow, a compromise between Mateo's insistence on traditional blue and Angel's preference for something warmer. "She doesn't care what color the walls are," Julia pointed out, leaning over the crib where baby Sophia slept with her tiny fists curled against her cheeks. "She can barely see yet. She has opinions," Mateo said defensively. She cried at the blue samples. She was hungry. She was expressing aesthetic distaste. Angel laughed from the rocking chair in the corner, watching her husband argue interior design with a 13-year-old. This was her life now. Debates about paint colors, midnight feedings, family dinners that somehow always devolved into competitive card games. It was chaos. Beautiful, messy, loud chaos. She loved every second of it. "Uncle Matt!" Luca burst into the nursery, immediately lowered his voice when 5 people shushed him, and continued in a whisper. "Bruno said there's a man at the gate. Says he's from the conservatory?" Angel sat up straighter. "The Manhattan Conservatory? That's the one." She looked at Mateo, who was already smiling. "What did you do?" "Nothing." His smile widened. "Except maybe donate enough money for a new concert hall, and suggest they might want to offer a teaching position to a certain brilliant pianist who happens to be my wife." Angel's mouth fell open. "Mateo, you gave up your career for me. For us." He crossed to her, kneeling beside the rocking chair. "I know you said you didn't mind, but I saw your face when you played for Sophia last week. The way you looked at that piano." He took her hand. "You're not meant to play only for our family, Angel. You're meant to play for the world." Tears pricked her eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll take the meeting." He kissed her knuckles. "Say you'll let me give you back what I took away." Angel looked at her husband, at the baby sleeping peacefully in her crib, at Julia and Luca hovering in the doorway, trying to pretend they weren't eavesdropping. This man had destroyed her once. Then he'd spent every day since rebuilding her, not into who she was before, but into someone stronger, someone who could stand beside a king and still remember she was a queen in her own right. "I'll take the meeting," she said. Mateo's answering smile was brighter than any spotlight. That night, after the children were asleep and the mansion had settled into quiet, Angel sat at the Steinway in her music room, the same piano where she'd played Chopin at 2 in the morning, the same piano where she'd taught Luca his first scales, the same piano where Mateo had confessed that he'd never stopped loving her. She began to play. The melody floated through the mansion like a blessing, through the hallways where guards now smiled instead of glowered, past the nursery where Sophia slept in yellow-painted peace, into the bedroom where Mateo stood at the window, listening. It wasn't Chopin this time. It was something new, something she'd been composing for months in stolen moments between feedings and family chaos. A symphony of error, transformed into something beautiful. A love song for the life she'd never expected. A promise that no matter what came next, she would face it with music in her heart and a family at her side. When the final note faded, Mateo appeared in the doorway. "New composition?" "Still working on it." Angel looked up at him. "It needs a title. What's it about?" She smiled. "A piano teacher who fell in love with a monster, and the monster who spent his whole life trying to be worthy of her." Mateo crossed the room and sat beside her on the bench. "Just like that first night. Just like every night since." "How does it end?" Angel leaned her head against his shoulder. "Happily," she said. "It ends happily." Outside the window, the moon rose over the Santoro gardens, replanted now, blooming again, beautiful despite the battle scars. Some things, it turned out, grew stronger after breaking. Some loves were worth the war. The end.